Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, broadcasting on Channels Television, live from Lagos. Here are a few reports from across the country. Let's begin with this one from Egon in Nasarawa State, showing this overloaded truck. Our eyewitness reporter says the truck must have passed through checkpoints. He's also appealing to relevant authorities to discourage such practices on the road to reduce accidents. Meanwhile, from Osademe Street in Efurum, Warri in Delta State comes this picture of flooded houses. Our eyewitness reporter says the flooding was caused by developers who built houses on the channels. He's appealing to the state government to come to their aid as they find it difficult moving out of their homes. Our next report is from Mazamaza in Amuodofin area of Lagos, showing this bad road. One can only imagine what transporters and other motorists go through when plying this road. Next is this picture of Ashava Street in Makurdi, the Benue State capital. As you can see, this bridge was put together by the community. Who knows what, knowing that governments can do better by constructing them a better one. Our last picture comes from Aba in Abia State, showing a flooded road. As we're in the rainy season, there are lots of concerns here, which of course will be that motorists will find it difficult making their way through this flooded road. Thank you for sending in those pictures and your reports. Please note that you can also be an eyewitness reporter for Channels Television. Now, the jumbo pay of Nigeria's National Assembly members is set to be the highest in the world. How can this be explained in a country where minimum wage of an average worker is 18,000 naira? And what is the economic implication of the wages of the lawmakers given the current economic indices? To discuss these questions and more, I'm being joined now on the news at 10 by an economist and the managing director of financial derivatives company, Mr. Bismarck Ruwane. You're welcome to the news at 10.
Good evening.
I know that you're very familiar with the figures already. What do you make of them?
First and foremost, let's define the problem. The problem is that Nigerian lawmakers are supposedly overpaid and underworked. They are overpaid in the context of the Nigerian minimum wage, also relative to the average income per capita, also compared to the productivity of the country and to its GDP. So what are the facts? The facts are, in nominal wage terms, Australia has the highest paid legislators in the world. They earn $201,000 a year, followed by Nigeria with $189,000 a year. But the average income per capita in Australia is $61,000. In other words, the Australian legislator earns 3 times the average income of the Australian, while the Nigerian legislator earns 59 times the average income per capita of a Nigerian. So that tells you all. These guys, according to this data, are living on easy street. So how many bills have they passed in this period? The last time I checked, between May 29 and this time, there have been 3 recesses. So they've been on vacation, basically. Now, let's take a look at Australia as a continent. In terms of land mass, Australia is probably about 5 times or 6 times Nigeria. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, take California. California is half the size of Nigeria in terms of land mass. But California has a GDP of $2.3 trillion. Nigeria has a GDP of 20% of that. Australia has 200 legislators and equivalent of 8 ministers. Nigeria has 42 ministers and 20 commissioners in average in 36 states. In other words, Nigeria is overgoverned, unproductive, and overpaid. Therefore, in terms of productivity, in terms of contribution, in terms of governance, bad signals. Economic decisions are signals. So the president has started by taking a cut in pay. I hear and I understand that the legislators are also thinking about cutting pay. But It's not just the salary. When you add the ancillary benefits, it comes to a significant sum compared to the income of the average Nigerian.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Rwani, it sounds like you're saying that lawmakers should be paid according to how much work they do.
Absolutely, yes. That's what everybody does. You see, if you overpay yourself lower than your productivity, it won't take long before the country gets bankrupt. And you see, you move from what they call fragile state to a failing state to a failed state. So right now, we can say we're in a fragile state. We could easily be on the border of being a failing state. And the only way to reverse that situation and become a virile state is that you need to start making everybody produce and send the right signals at the executive level, the legislative level, the judicial level, and corporate and consumer level, every level of the country. The country's productivity is 1.8%. Productivity growth is 1.8%, while the economy itself is growing at about 3.96, averagely 6% over the past 5 years. In other words, if you kill every Nigerian, this country will still grow at 4%. The labor productivity growth is far too low compared to the rest of the world.
And what will help to solve this problem? Will it be that lawmakers should take a pay cut, or that
produce more? You don't have to.
You don't have to cut the
You don't have to cut the salary,
salaries,
but just be more productive.
But you can increase minimum wage at least.
Yeah, you can do that, but also productivity. It's not about selecting segments of the economy that are not productive. The point is that generally there's low productivity, low work ethic in the country. Now you need to increase this and send the right signals. So if everybody is on these jumbo salaries, on vacation all the time, easy street, living large, living on the fast lane, you are going to have a situation where not too long after this, you will have a situation. Right now, the price of oil is $46 a barrel. It used to be 108, 116. So in other words, we are at 60% below our income, natural wealth. Yet we are living as if nothing happened.
The lawmakers' allowances and their salaries are said to be equivalent to the per capita allowances allocated to about 5 ministries in the country. What would you say to that?
Well, that's a bit misleading. The ministries are allocated a certain amount, but you know that the recurrent expenditure, the trappings and all of that, we are running a deficit, a fiscal deficit of about almost 2% of our GDP. Our fiscal revenues are down by as much as almost 52%. Salaries in arrears in states were as much as 12 months. Now they're down to average of about 3 or 4 months. The reserves are being managed, somehow, and we have inflation running at about 9.2%. So the economic indicators are fairly stable, but we are not in an easy path right now. We have some challenges ahead, and quite frankly, at $46 a barrel, with the tendency that it may go lower, there's going to be some economic turbulence ahead. And the signals are quite clear. I think the executive is very clear that we need to cut back. We need to cut our coat according to our cloth, and we need to make some sacrifices. And that is why, both at the executive, judicial, and legislative level, there's a need for the right signal and sacrifices. You cannot ask people to make sacrifices when you are not leading from the top. There's a trust deficit in Nigeria which has to be addressed.
If you have to compare what lawmakers earn in Nigeria to what other African countries, as you can see there in the slide, Kenya and Ghana,
Yes.
well, it's much, much higher than what these other countries earn. And I know that there was a time that Kenyan lawmakers were actually asking for about $10,000 extra added
Yes.
to their own allowance.
No, that is the moral. You see, the moral fabric of the African countries, and because of poverty, and government is everything in those countries. But if you look at Ghana, Ghana is having 31 times, the salaries are 31 times the income per capita. Ours is 59. Kenya, which is another extravagant country, is having 55 times, and they're trying to cut that back. But the difference between Kenya and Nigeria is that Kenya is a produce wealth economy. That is, they produce flowers, horticulture, they produce tea, they live on tourism, and they send out, they earn $1 billion a year from just horticulture, where they, flowers, and they send roses every day to Amsterdam for the auction. The Kenyan economy is half the size of the Lagos economy. So in terms of productivity, there's a lot of productivity there, but also they're spending much more than they can afford.
Finally, would cutting down the number of lawmakers that we have, would that actually help? Because you mentioned Australia, which is a continent, has only 226
legislators. Yeah.
legislators. We have 469, and yet we're earning even much higher than Italy, which has 945.
No, but it's even more misleading. 469 are federal legislators. In each of the states, the 36 states, you have the state houses of assembly, you have local government councils in 774. So in other words, the country is so overgoverned. As a matter of, there's a law of diminishing marginal returns, which means that if you increase the number of workers on a fixed amount of land and you fix the other resources, the productivity begins to reduce over time. So this nation, as it were, is overgoverned. The former Western Nigeria under Chief Awolowo includes about 8 states, all the way from Lagos down to Delta and Edo State. And at that time, Chief Awolowo, as Premier of Western Nigeria, had something like 12 commissioners running what today, if you had 20 times 8, 12 commissioners were doing the work of 160 commissioners. In the former Western Nigeria, 12 commissioners. Now, in that land space, we have 160 commissioners. And what are they doing? And then they have special assistants, they have permanent secretaries, you have also. So how much governance is taking place? And that we have to understand that we can't afford it anymore.
Mr. Irwani, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10 to explain these figures and the lawmakers' jumbo pay. I'll be speaking with an economist, Mr. Bismarck Irwani, on the lawmakers' allowances and their annual salaries. The World Bank loan approved by the Senate for Edo State is one that has generated much controversy, especially from the opposition People's Democratic Party in the state. But the state governor, Mr. Adams Oshomole, has dismissed fear by the opposition that the loan will compound the state's debt profile. He insisted the decision to obtain the loan can be justified from the projects being undertaken by the government.
World Bank report says it approved Edo State loan because spending plans were within the ability of the state to raise revenue and to keep debts within acceptable limits. But the PDP disagrees.
A lot of apprehensions have been raised, and outrightly, the people have said they don't want the loan.
Despite opposition, the Senate approved the loan, raising more concerns from the PDP.
In 25 to 30 years' time, if the way the government is going today, the APC government going today, that since they came into government, the naira has been receiving a lot of bashing to the extent we're now buying dollar at 221. If they carry on for another 4 years, the dollar might end up at 400 naira to 1. 400 naira times $75 million, that is close to 200 or 300 billion naira. So these are the issues we are worried about.
The facts from the Debt Management Office puts Edo domestic debts as at 2013 at 48 billion naira, in the same league as Osun and Plateau states. The big borrowers being Lagos, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, Cross River, and Delta states. Edo's external debts is $123.1 million, and Lagos State $1.17 billion. Governor Oshomole says these figures are even now lower.
The only loan we have had from the World Bank was 75. The rest was borrowed by previous PDP governments. It's a continuous. That is no money borrowed by this government. We had a bond of $25 billion, out of which we have paid over 20 billion. We have less than 5 billion on our bonds.
But have these translated to projects?
We got a facility at 1%, with a 20-year spread. And that worries them. And we are not taking it to pay salaries. We are not taking it to pay pension. We are taking it to work.
While opposition continues to mount on the loan, some of those who benefited from the fallout of previous loan differ.
For you do well for my body. You do well, you don't let my heart fall for God.
The APC government and the opposition PDP in Edo State agree on one subject. wishes the development of the state, and it is hoped that this will be achieved in the long run.
Still ahead of the news at 10, over 500 sacked electricity workers have stopped operations in Port Harcourt. To join us again.